Hi everyone, this is lesson 6 and we're going to be focusing on communication. Communication occurs when the message that I want to send is the message that you hear. But as we know from everyday conversations, there are a lot of variables that affect the quality of that. For the person who's wanting to talk, the sender, why do we not transmit clear messages? Well, they can often be for fear. We're worried about the response, so we sort of get vague, tone it down, or become overly aggressive. Times we don't communicate at all, we remain silent. Other times we can be garbled in how we communicate because we're not really sure of what we're trying to say. And often we can just be confused. For the receiver, the one hearing the message, this can be affected by our feelings or what we know or perceive of the person who's speaking. If you go back and think about when you were a child, the teacher speaking to you or your employer, those power dynamics can arouse maybe anxiety in us, and so we don't always hear the message clearly. So it's easy for us to jump to conclusions wrongly. I think that happens to us every day. I know if I'm a bit tired or my husband is, we can say something and either of us can read it the wrong way and get defensive and feel like we're being criticized. Setting is a really important factor. Not trying to have those heavy conversations when you're in a rush, late at night, when it's harder to think what you're trying to say and harder for the other person to listen. Being in an environment that's free of distractions, like you're not trying to have an important conversation with a lot of people running around or the TV blaring. So just think of your setting when you're trying to have a meaningful conversation. So the potential for things to go wrong in communication is huge, particularly in the counselling room where two people who don't know each other very well are having a deep conversation. So this week we'll just concentrate on the listening side of the communication, and next week we'll look at the responding side. So first of all, why do we have to be good listeners? What's our example? How important is it? Being made in the image of God, we are his image bearers. And so how does he listen to us? In Psalm 56, we're told he puts our tears in a bottle. He's observing. In Malachi 3, we're told that he hears and pays attention to the words that are spoken and writes them down in his book of remembrance. Psalm 139, we know that he knows our thoughts before we think them, before our words before we say them. Psalm 121, he neither sleeps nor slumbers, but he watches over us. And that word watch there is to wait, regard, observe, and to heed. So listening is a high and holy calling, and we were created to be listeners and listened to. Proverbs 21:11 says, when a wise man is instructed, he gains knowledge. The word instructed there is to look upon, to give attention to consider, to ponder. Knowledge means a skill, discernment, understanding, and wisdom. So I'd really, those are good words that make up what listening is. It's giving attention to, it's considering, it's a skill to be developed, wisdom to be applied, and the use of discernment. So those are all great components that make up good listening qualities. So here are just a few pointers on what to help to be a good listener. And we've talked about some of these before, but just to go over them, because learning to listen was really hard work for me. So I am going to repeat a few things because it was through repetition that I learned. So we've talked about being more aware of the other person than yourself. This other-centeredness shows our expression of care for that person. Allowing the person to finish what they're saying without interrupting, criticizing, jumping to conclusions, or changing the subject. This can be really hard when the counsellor has just said something that has really shocked you. You could suddenly judge, lose your concentration. They're really going on at length and you're starting to get bored. You can be tempted to hurry them up or interrupt. Jumping to conclusions, what they mean when they're not being very clear what they're saying. They're just hinting at various things. If the conversation suddenly becomes uncomfortable, you might want to change the subject. If the counsellee is wandering all over the place, the story's not coherent, it's easy to feel frustrated and lose concentration. So good listening means attending to the client and staying with them, even when it's challenging. So a word I like is to keep tracking them. I know this is not a very good analogy maybe, but if you ever watched a dog track a scent, he just keeps on that track. He might have to go around the tree and then he picks up the scent again, and he might have to go through a river, but he picks up the scent again. In other words, he stays on track. He's focused on staying with the scent. So please excuse the poor analogy, but just being that focused, that staying upon what they're saying. We need to concentrate on what's being said without being distracted. And sometimes you'll have to think about the room that you're going to be in. If you've got it's summer and there are flies running around, or if you've got a winter tree that might be slapping against the window, or neighborhood children being noisy, it's easy to get distracted. We get distracted with our own thoughts. And so if you do, just be honest and just say, hey, look, I got distracted. Could we just go back a bit? So good listening requires self-discipline, and it is a skill. And I used to get very discouraged at my lack of skill in listening. But over the years, and I will say years, by God's grace, it has improved. And I've had a wonderful example in my life of someone who is the most tremendous listener that I've ever encountered. And so when I'm with that person, I really look and learn, and I just try and take in who they are and how they do it so well. Waiting for the person to finish before working out a reply. Listening requires respect for the other person, and respect is shown by allowing that person to finish what they want to say, even when we know where they're heading. Just allow them to finish. Now here's another big one for me: being comfortable with silence, not having to fill in the gap. That's been a huge one for me to learn. I've had to really work at that. I think gaps sort of frighten me and make me a bit nervous, even in social gatherings. But I've seen time and again how it is so powerful to slow down, to allow that silence, because the counsellee really benefits from that. It gives them a chance to reflect and process on what we're talking about. Very powerful thing. Another one is recognizing the emotional highs and lows, how their tones, are they becoming more intense or quieter? Those are clues. Body language. The non-verbal messages should measure up with the words. And if they don't, there's another clue. Generally, the non-verbal will speak louder than our verbal. I am not angry. There's an example. The ability, we've talked about empathy